Hello, welcome to another episode of Bville Live. Today I'm going to be cooking some delicious mung bean stew. Mung beans come from East Asia. They're very good for you. You can get them in Asian markets and Indian markets. A lot of times they're used to make with curry, but they can be used for many delicious recipes. And I've always made a soup or a stew out of them. So I wanted to show you what we're going to be doing with them today. I'm cooking them for somebody at my church, and it's a great recipe if you're cooking for a friend or somebody who's sick. And it's easy to prepare. It makes a lot of them. So I'm using a 1 pound package of mung beans. I'm using some celery and bacon. I'll give you a quick pan of that in a second, and I'll show you how to prepare it. So I chopped up 3 stalks of celery, 2 small onions, and a couple of bacon ends that I chopped, and I'm preparing that in my pan over medium heat. You don't need to cook your celery and onions ahead of time, but since I'm cooking up the bacon, I thought I'd throw them in ahead of time. I wanted to show you what the mung beans look like. They're small little beans. They look almost like peas. They're from the legume family. And I soaked them I didn't soak them, I rinsed them, and I put them in a pot to boil. They cook up pretty readily. So I'm going to add my celery and carrots and bacon to that in a few minutes. And then I'm also chopping up some carrots and garlic. And I'm going to add some seasoning to this. And this will cook for an hour or two, and I'll show you what it looks like when it's done. They're delicious, and they're very versatile, and they're very healthy for you. Real high in magnesium and potassium. They're good if people are not feeling well. So let me show you the rest of the recipe. So, in addition to the mung beans that are boiling and the celery and onions and bacon, I'm going to be adding some chopped carrots. The chopped carrots don't need to be sauteed. I can add them directly to my pot. I'm going to chop up another one. I have my vegetables, of course, that I'm using from Brady Farm, which is an organic farm in Syracuse that I get all my fresh vegetables from. I'm cooking for somebody at my church. And oftentimes we get, if we belong to a church or community, sometimes you'll be asked to cook for a family who's ill or having some problems, and I was asked to cook for them, so I'm cooking some mung bean soup. Mung beans, I picked mung bean soup because it's very good for you. It's very high in folates and magnesium and calcium. A lot of people aren't familiar with mung beans. As I said, especially with vegetarian cooking or cooking like that, you want to get used to trying different things. You can always Google it, look it up on Wikipedia, figure out what it's used for, and you don't have to use them for traditional things. A lot of people make curries and things like that with mung beans, but they can be used for soups or stews. So grains and legumes are very versatile. And since we eat a lot of beans and legumes, which are very good for you, they help extend your life. You can use them interchangeably. So however you would use them for beans or things like that. And you don't have to stick to just, Asian recipes. You can use them, with American twists or American vegetables, or you can make them the traditional way. So in another video, I'll make them in a traditional way, but since I'm cooking them for an American family and I'm not sure what their tastes are, mostly everybody likes soups and stews, so I'll cook this and give them a loaf of bread with it too, and that'll be a delicious meal, and they can freeze the extra portions. So I've already, like I said, I'm cooking up my celery and my onions and bacon over here on the stove that I showed you earlier. And once that bacon is browned, I'm going to add that to the pot. It doesn't matter if your celery and onions are fully cooked. I just want my bacon cooked. Not burnt, but, just cooked. Okay, so it's, has a nice flavor. I'm going to crush my cloves of garlic. Now, if you have garlic that you can't crush with your hand, you just take the flat of your blade, give it a good whack on your cutting board once or twice. And I do that with the skin on, and the reason I do that is because it makes it so much easier to peel. See how easy the skin comes right off now? And then you're left with just the clove of garlic to mince. I'm going to mince up some garlic. And I always throw garlic and onions in almost anything, any kind of soups or stews. My go-to vegetables are going to be onions, garlic, celery, and carrots. I use that for almost anything that I make. I really like the flavors. And it doesn't always taste the same. It tastes different depending on the spices and herbs that you're going to be using. So I'm just going to put the garlic right in the pot. I'm not going to fry that in the pan. And then I'm going to add another one, do the same thing. Give it a good whack. And the reason that I do that is because I said it makes it super easy to peel. You see how easy that came off? And it also breaks open the cells that release the chemicals that give garlic its healing properties. Garlic's very, very good for your heart and cardiovascular system. It thins the blood. Some people eat several cloves of garlic a day raw, which is very good for you as well. So since I'm making a pound of beans and I use like 3 carrots, 3 stalks of celery, I'm going to use 3 or 4 cloves of garlic depending on the size. And the same thing with onions. So if you figure 3 small onions or 1 large one, 3 stalks of celery, 3 small carrots. If you don't have regular long carrots and you're using the baby carrots, which so many people buy in the store these days, just use like a handful of carrots. So, you know, half a cup to a cup, depending on what you like. I like the carrots in my soups and stews because it gives it a little bit of a sweet flavor. And this is going to be really good. And I'm going to have enough that I can have a cup or 2 for myself, and I'll give the rest away. So, when you do this, like I said, it makes it very easy to chop up. And if you have a piece of garlic that's, you know, got a little bit of funkiness to it, you can just cut it off. I mean, you know, sometimes things grow in the earth the way they are. It's not going to kill you. As long as it doesn't smell bad or it's not mushy, you can still use the remaining piece of garlic. People think that everything's got to be perfect, but, you know, nothing in nature is perfect. Everything has its irregularities, so don't get freaked out if you have a fruit or a vegetable with a blemish, and especially if you're getting organic products. They're not going to be perfect like you see in the stores, although I have to say the stuff from Brady Farms has been consistently of very good quality. Alright, so my carrots are in here, and my legumes are cooking very nicely, and my bacon is cooked at this point. So I'm just going to put my bacon in here. There wasn't very much fat on this bacon, so hardly any at all, so I don't really need to scrape it out, but if you're, you know, really concerned about that, you can blot it first. I usually cut the fat off the bacon before I cook it. Okay. So I have my celery, my onions, my carrots in here. Now, the pot is pretty full at this point, so I'm going to add some more water. Always remember when you're cooking legumes that they're going to absorb water. So you want to make sure that you add plenty of water along the way. So basically, you know, you just look at it, and I usually just take a glass and pour it in so that it's covered 1 or 2, you know, inches above. When you're first cooking it, you're going to need more water. And then as it cooks and absorbs and gets thicker, you're not going to add more water to it because your soup or stew will be too thin. But initially you need to have enough water to cover about 1 to 2 inches of your beans and vegetables. Okay, so now my beans and vegetables are covered with water in here. I'm going to add my seasonings to it. You can add your seasonings later, but I don't want to forget. So, and since I'm cooking for somebody else, I don't know if they're on a salt-restricted diet or not. So I always cook the way I cook, and if people want to add more salt, that's fine. You can always add salt, but you can't take it away. So I'm going to add some salt to it. I'm adding about 1/4 to 1/2 teaspoon of salt. Probably more on the 1/2 teaspoon side since I'm making a pound of beans. Okay, I'm going to add pepper to that. About 1/4 teaspoon of pepper. I'm going to add my Mrs. Dashes. That's about 1/2 teaspoon. And because this is a Indian East Asian dish, turmeric and cumin would certainly be called for in this dish. I don't add a lot, so it's not going to taste like curry, but I am going to add some. I like the flavor to it. So about a 1/4 teaspoon of cumin and about 1/2 teaspoon of turmeric. Now, you could add some cayenne pepper or chili to it, but I'm not sure if these people like hot food, so I'm going to skip that for now. You know, like I said, when you're cooking for other people, you want to make sure that, you know, they enjoy the dish. And it doesn't need it. So I'm going to give that a stir. And once it's cooked, I will taste it, and if it needs a little more salt, I can adjust it or leave it, or just tell them that, you know, I didn't put a lot of salt in. So I'm going to put this, I'm going to let this come to a boil. When it comes to a boil, I'm going to turn the heat down to a medium-low, put the lid on it, and then let it simmer for an hour. And we'll check it then, and I'll show you what it looks like when it's done. Okay, this has been cooking for about 30 to 40 minutes. You can see how thick it got. So it doesn't really take that long to cook mung beans. They cook up pretty quickly. I've also added a 16-ounce can of turnip greens to it. You can add any kind of greens that you have. If you have fresh greens, do that just when the beans are finished cooking. I always like to add beans and greens together. It's a nice pairing. And that is done. So you can see how thick that stew is, and that's going to make a delicious hearty meal. You can serve that with a French baguette or some Italian bread. Enjoy!